Silence in the shadows. Olivia Reed stared at the half-empty mug of cold coffee, watching the thin film on its surface fracture as she gently tapped the ceramic rim. Outside the cafe window, Seattle's perpetual drizzle painted everything in shades of gray. Fitting, she thought, for a day when her 3-year relationship was dissolving before her eyes. I just don't understand why you're throwing away a perfectly good career in marketing to chase this hobby, Nathan said, his voice low but sharp. He adjusted his perfectly knotted tie, a habit he'd developed whenever discussing what he considered impractical ideas. It's not a hobby, Nathan. It's what I've always wanted to do. Olivia tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, trying to keep her voice steady. I connect with people through stories. I always have. Nathan sighed, the kind of exhale that carried the weight of repeated arguments. Speaking on stages doesn't pay bills, Liv. Your stories are sweet, but they're not going to build the kind of life we've talked about. The life he'd talked about, she silently corrected. The suburban house, the executive positions, the carefully planned vacations twice a year, a life measured in promotions and acquisitions. I've been asked to develop a workshop series at the community center, she said, straightening her shoulders. And I've started outlining my book proposal. Nathan's laugh wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was dismissive, the sound of someone humoring a child's fantasy. Come on, Liv, be realistic. The world doesn't need another motivational speaker or self-help book. It needs people who can deliver tangible results. My results are people feeling less alone, Olivia countered, finding her voice growing stronger despite the familiar ache in her chest. That's tangible to me. To you, maybe. Nathan checked his watch, another habit that had once seemed efficient but now felt like a countdown to when she'd stop mattering. But it's not enough for what I want in a partner. I need someone who thinks bigger. The irony of his statement hung between them. To Olivia, there was nothing bigger than connecting human hearts through vulnerability and shared experience. To Nathan, if it couldn't be measured in revenue or market share, it didn't count. I think what you mean is that I'm not enough, Olivia said quietly, the realization settling into her bones like truth. Nathan didn't deny it. You're too soft for the real world, Liv. Always have been. These dreams of TED Talks and writing books, they're not realistic for someone like you. Someone like me, she repeated, the words tasting bitter. You know what I mean. You're sensitive. You take everything to heart. The business of public speaking is brutal. You'd be torn apart. Olivia looked out at the rain, watching pedestrians hurry past with umbrellas and determined expressions. For 3 years, she'd been shrinking herself to fit into Nathan's practical world, setting aside her journals and declining invitations to speak at local events because they conflicted with his networking dinners. I think we want different things, she finally said. I think we always have. Nathan's voice softened, not with affection but with resignation. You'll never be enough for the life I want. Live. And I'm starting to think I'm not enough for the life you're dreaming about. The truth of it stung, but also released something that had been trapped inside her chest for too long. Olivia nodded slowly, gathering her bag and scarf. I hope you find someone practical enough for your world, Nathan. Walking out of the cafe into the rain, Olivia didn't bother with her umbrella. The cold droplets against her skin felt clarifying, washing away years of doubt. Her phone buzzed, an email from Dr. Eleanor Winters, the communications professor whose guest lecture had ignited something in Olivia months ago. Regarding your inquiry about the storytelling workshop, the subject line read. Standing under the awning of a bookstore, rain dripping from her hair, Olivia opened the message. Your sample speech moved me deeply, Dr. Winters had written. There's an authentic voice here that deserves development. If you're serious about this path, I'd like to work with you. Not everyone can create spaces where others feel truly heard. You can! For the first time in years, Olivia felt the flutter of possibility unfurling inside her. Nathan was right about one thing. She wasn't enough for the life he wanted. But perhaps she was exactly enough for the life that was waiting for her to claim it. Echoes of courage. The community college classroom smelled of chalk dust and possibility. Olivia adjusted the small microphone clip to her blouse, heart hammering as 15 pairs of eyes watched her expectantly. 6 months had passed since the cafe with Nathan. 6 months of rebuilding herself piece by piece. "Remember," Dr. Eleanor Winters murmured from the side of the room, her silver-streaked hair catching the fluorescent light. "They're not judging you. They're waiting to connect." Olivia nodded, took a deep breath, and began the story she'd rehearsed countless times in her apartment mirror. 3 years ago, I lost my voice. Not physically, but in all the ways that mattered. As she spoke about finding courage in small moments, about reclaiming silenced parts of herself, she noticed something shift in the room. The restless shuffling stilled. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. A man with tattooed arms nodded with unexpected recognition. When she finished, the silence stretched for 3 heartbeats before the applause began. Not thunderous, but genuine. Dr. Winters beamed from her corner. "That," she said later as they walked across the rain-washed campus, "is what authentic connection looks like. You made that happen, Olivia." "It felt different than I expected," Olivia admitted, clutching her folder of notes. "Less like performing and more like a conversation," Dr. Winters finished. "The best speakers aren't performing at all. They're inviting others into a shared experience." They stopped at a bench beneath a maple tree, its autumn leaves creating a canopy of russet and gold. Dr. Winters sat, patting the space beside her. "You've made remarkable progress, but there's something still holding you back." Her keen eyes studied Olivia's face. "You're afraid to fully claim your story." Olivia looked down at her hands. "Nathan's voice is still in my head sometimes, telling me this is impractical, that I'm fooling myself." "Ah," Dr. Winters nodded. "The ghost critic. We all have them. Mine was my father, convinced women shouldn't speak in public forums." She smiled wryly. 4 decades of lecturing later, I still sometimes hear him. "How did you silence him?" "I didn't." Dr. Winters plucked a fallen maple leaf, tracing its veins. "I acknowledged him. Then I spoke anyway. Eventually, his voice became just another echo among many, not the authority." That evening, Olivia sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, surrounded by journals spanning years. She'd been documenting her journey all along, the doubts, the small victories, the moments when words connected her to strangers who became something more. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mira, a woman from her workshop who'd become a friend. "My sister's organizing a women's leadership conference next month. They need another speaker. Told her all about you. Interested?" Olivia's fingers hovered over the screen. Nathan's voice whispered, "Too soon." "Not ready. Not enough." Behind it, quieter but clearer, came Dr. Winters. "Acknowledge him." "Then speak anyway." "Yes," Olivia typed. "I'd love to discuss it." The conference was held in a hotel ballroom that felt impossibly vast compared to Dr. Winters' classroom. 50 people had become 200, their faces blurring as Olivia approached the podium. For one terrible moment, she froze. Then she spotted Dr. Winters in the 3rd row, her expression calm and expectant. Not demanding perfection, just presence. "3 years ago, I lost my voice," Olivia began, the words steadier this time. "This is the story of how I found it again, and why I believe your voice matters too." When she finished speaking about resilience and authenticity, the applause washed over her like a wave. Afterward, a line formed. Women and men wanting to share their own stories of silencing and reclamation. "You have a gift," said a woman with kind eyes and a business card that read, "Madison Hayes, publisher, Resonant Press. Have you considered developing these ideas into a book?" Later, walking back to her apartment beneath a sky studded with stars, Olivia felt something expanding in her chest. The whispers of self-doubt hadn't disappeared, but they'd been joined by new voices. The woman who'd whispered, "Thank you," with tears in her eyes. The teenager who'd asked how to start finding his voice. Dr. Winters saying simply, "You're ready." Her phone buzzed with a notification from the blog she'd started 3 months earlier. Another 100 subscribers, comments filling the latest post. Olivia stopped walking for a moment, looking up at the vast night sky. For the first time in years, she felt not just enough, but abundant. full of words that mattered, stories that connected, courage that had been there all along. Nathan had been wrong about her being too soft. Her softness wasn't weakness. It was her greatest strength, the ability to remain open in a world that rewarded armor. Dr. Winters had seen it from the beginning. Now finally, Olivia could see it too. Finding her voice. The manuscript pages spread across Olivia's kitchen table like fallen leaves, covered in red ink and post-it notes. 18 months of early mornings and late nights, of stories excavated from the deepest parts of herself. Her book, Whispers to Roars, Finding Your Authentic Voice in a Noisy World, was taking shape under Madison Hayes' patient guidance. "We're close," Madison had said during their last call. "But the final chapter needs something more. The transformation feels incomplete." Olivia sipped her tea, knowing Madison was right. She'd written about losing her voice, about the painful dissolution with Nathan, about finding Dr. Winters and beginning to speak again. But she'd stopped short of the full truth, that the journey wasn't simply about speaking. It was about believing she deserved to be heard. Her phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Regional Speaker Showcase, 2 p.m. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't another friendly audience like her workshops or the women's conference. This was a competitive event where agents and event coordinators scouted new talent. Winners often found themselves on bigger stages, sometimes even the TED circuit. "One step at a time," Olivia murmured, gathering her notes. The phrase had become her mantra, a counter to the old habit of overwhelming herself with the entirety of a dream. The showcase venue was a renovated theater with plush red seats and gilded moldings. Backstage, speakers paced and practiced, their nervous energy palpable. Olivia found a quiet corner, closing her eyes to center herself as Dr. Winters had taught her. "Olivia Reed?" A woman with a clipboard approached. "You're up after Bennett." Through a gap in the curtains, Olivia watched a polished man in a tailored suit deliver a presentation on leadership with machine gun precision. His words were flawless, his gestures practiced. The audience nodded appreciatively. It was perfect, technically speaking, and utterly forgettable. "Now welcoming to the stage, Olivia Reed," the announcer's voice boomed. Walking into the spotlight, Olivia felt a moment of clarity. She didn't need to be perfect. She needed to be real. "I'd prepared a different talk," she began, setting aside her notes, "about effective communication techniques and platform building. But standing here, I realize that's not what I need to say today." Instead, she told the story of her grandmother's last days, how the woman who'd raised her had lost her ability to speak after a stroke, communicating only through handwritten notes and the language of presence. How in those silent hospital rooms, Olivia had learned that communication transcended words. "We think speaking is about being heard," she said, her voice steady with conviction. "But the most powerful speaking begins with listening to others, to the world, and most importantly, to ourselves." When she finished, the silence in the theater felt different than any she'd experienced before. Not awkward or evaluative, but resonant, as if her words still hung in the air, touching something within each person present. The applause began slowly, then built. As she left the stage, the competition's organizer pressed a card into her hand. "Remarkable authenticity," she murmured. "We need to talk." That evening, sitting on her apartment balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, Olivia received 3 emails, an invitation to speak at a national conference, a podcast request, and a note from Madison about the final chapter. "I think you found it today," Madison wrote. "The missing piece. Call me tomorrow." Over the next months, Olivia's calendar filled with speaking engagements. Her blog subscribers multiplied. The book inched closer to completion. But more important than these external markers of success was the internal shift, the steadying of her voice, the quieting of doubt. At a literary festival where she'd been invited to speak about authentic communication, a woman approached her at the signing table, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your talk changed something in me," she said, clutching Olivia's just-published book. "I've been silent for so long, letting others define my worth." Today, I finally heard myself again. Driving home that night, Olivia thought about how far she'd come from that rain-soaked day when Nathan had told her she'd never be enough. Not because she'd proven him wrong, though perhaps she had, but because she'd stopped measuring herself by anyone else's definition of success. Her phone rang through the car speakers. Dr. Winters. "Calling with news? I've nominated you for the TED residency program," she said without preamble. "They're looking for emerging voices with fresh perspectives on communication and connection. It's competitive, but—" "Thank you," Olivia interrupted, her heart racing. "Even if nothing comes of it, thank you for believing this was possible." "I didn't make it possible, Olivia," Dr. Winters replied. "I just recognized what was already there." 3 weeks later, the email arrived. Subject line: TED Residency Program, Acceptance. Olivia read it twice, then stepped onto her balcony, breathing in the night air. Somewhere in the city, people were going about their lives, carrying their own silenced stories. Some of them might one day hear her words and find the courage to speak their own. That, she realized, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Part 4. The Spotlight's Revelation. Nathan Foster adjusted his Italian leather office chair, the skyline of Chicago framed perfectly in the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. Success had materialized exactly as he'd planned. The partnership at the consulting firm, the penthouse apartment, the respect of peers who mattered in his industry. All the tangible results he'd always valued. So why did satisfaction remain elusive? His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 3 o'clock canceled. You have a clear schedule until dinner with the Atkinson clients at 7. "Thanks, Vanessa," he replied. Turning to his computer, the email that had been sitting unopened in his inbox all day seemed to pulse with unresolved energy. Subject line: "Thought you might find this interesting. Marcus." His college roommate, now working in digital media, occasionally sent him articles or videos he thought relevant to Nathan's work. Usually, Nathan appreciated Marcus's curation. Today, something made him hesitate before clicking. The link opened to a TED talk titled "The Courage to be Seen, Vulnerability as Strength in Leadership." The thumbnail showed a woman with auburn hair in a simple blue dress, standing confidently on the iconic red circle. Olivia. Nathan's finger hovered over the trackpad, nearly closing the window. 3 years had passed since their breakup. 3 years in which he dated strategically but never quite connected. Advanced professionally but felt increasingly hollow. Against his better judgment, he pressed play. "The most dangerous words I ever believed," Olivia began, her voice clear and resonant, "were that I wasn't enough." Nathan sat perfectly still as she spoke about authentic leadership, about how vulnerability created stronger connections than perfection ever could. She didn't mention him by name, but he recognized fragments of their story woven into her larger narrative, how believing we must be. Invulnerable creates distance from ourselves, and others were taught that success means never showing weakness, she said, her gaze direct even through the screen. But what if our greatest strength lies in acknowledging our humanity? Not despite our softness, but because of it? The audience leaned forward in their seats, captivated. So did Nathan. "The person who told me I wasn't enough wasn't cruel," Olivia continued. "He was afraid of a world where worth isn't measured in achievements or acquisitions. Afraid, perhaps, of his own longing for something deeper than success." The words hit with unexpected force. Nathan paused the video, standing to pace his immaculate office. How had she seen what he himself hadn't recognized? The fear beneath his ambition, the emptiness within his accomplishments. He resumed the video, watching as Olivia concluded to a standing ovation. The counter showed over 2 million views. The comments section overflowed with responses, people sharing their own stories of reclaiming their voices, of finding courage through vulnerability. Almost without conscious thought, Nathan found himself searching for more information. Olivia's published book, now a bestseller, her speaking tour dates, the community she'd built around authentic communication. His phone buzzed, a reminder about the client dinner. Nathan silenced it, something he'd never done before. Instead, he opened another tab and typed, Authentic Leadership Vulnerability Connection. Articles appeared, several citing Olivia's work. One featured a photograph of her with Dr. Eleanor Winters, identified as her mentor and collaborator. "Everything all right, Mr. Foster?" Vanessa stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "You've never missed pre-meeting prep before." "Cancel the dinner," Nathan said, still staring at the screen. "Family emergency." There was no emergency, at least not the kind Vanessa assumed. But something fundamental had shifted inside him, plates of certainty grinding against each other to reveal fault lines he'd long ignored. At home in his minimalist penthouse, Nathan poured himself a whiskey and walked to the windows. The city lights blurred below, thousands of lives intersecting in patterns he could barely comprehend. For years, he'd viewed success as a ladder to be climbed, relationships as strategic alliances, emotions as inefficiencies to be managed. Watching Olivia's talk had cracked something open, the realization that in pursuing a life measured only in achievements, he'd sacrificed the very connections that gave those achievements meaning. He opened his laptop again, finding the contact page on Olivia's professional website. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. What could he possibly say? That he'd been wrong? That her success proved him wrong? No, that would make this about him again, about being right or wrong. The truth was both simpler and more complex. He hadn't seen her, truly seen her, when they were together, and perhaps he hadn't seen himself either. Nathan closed the laptop without writing. Some revelations demanded more than hasty words. Some apologies required growth before they could be offered with integrity. Instead, he opened his calendar and deleted 3 networking events for the coming week. In their place, he scheduled something he hadn't done in years. Nothing. Space to think, to feel, to listen to the disquiet that had been growing beneath his perfect life. Olivia had found her voice by embracing what he'd dismissed as weakness. Perhaps it was time he examined his own silences, the emotions he'd denied, the connections he'd sacrificed, the parts of himself he'd locked away in pursuit of a success that now felt hollow. Outside his window, Chicago continued its restless dance of light and shadow. For the first time in years, Nathan Foster allowed himself to wonder if he'd been measuring his life by the wrong metrics all along, and if it might not be too late to learn a different way of being in the world. Part 5, Whispers of Tomorrow. The bookstore was crowded beyond capacity, folding chairs arranged in tight rows with standing room at the back. Olivia surveyed the audience from the small podium, still amazed after 2 years on the speaking circuit that her words could draw such gatherings. "Before I begin reading from Whispers to Roars," he said, "I want to thank you all for creating this community of authentic communication. Your stories have become part of mine." As she read selected passages about finding courage through vulnerability, Olivia noticed a latecomer slip into the back of the room, tall in a charcoal coat, face obscured as he removed a rain-dampened scarf. Something about his posture triggered a flicker of recognition, but she continued reading, pushing the distraction aside. Afterward, during the signing portion, Olivia connected with each person who approached her table, the young teacher implementing her communication techniques in his classroom, the executive rethinking her leadership style, the teenager who'd found the courage to perform his poetry publicly. "Your book helped me understand what I've been missing." The voice made her look up from the book she'd been signing. Nathan stood before her, older but unmistakable. His confident exterior remained, but something in his eyes had changed, a softness that hadn't been there before, an uncertainty that felt almost vulnerable. "Nathan," she said, his name strange on her tongue after so long. The last person in line glanced between them curiously before moving away. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me," he said, a self-deprecating smile flickering across his face. "It's been 4 years." "I remember," Olivia replied, closing her pen. She'd imagined this moment occasionally, running into him at an airport or coffee shop. She'd anticipated anger or vindication. Instead, she felt an unexpected calm. "I saw your TED Talk," he continued. "Then read your book. Twice, actually. And?" The word held no challenge. just genuine curiosity. Nathan glanced around the emptying bookstore. Could we maybe talk somewhere? I promise not to take much of your time. They ended up at a small cafe 2 blocks away, rain pattering against the windows in a rhythm that echoed their conversation from years ago. But everything else had changed. I owe you an apology, Nathan said after they'd settled with their drinks. What I said to you about not being enough, it was never about you. It was about my own limitations. Olivia studied him, noting the new lines around his eyes, the slight softening of his once rigid posture. I don't need an apology, Nathan. That conversation, painful as it was, helped set me free. I know. He nodded. I saw that in your talk. How you transformed it into something powerful. He hesitated, but I needed to say it anyway. For myself. Something in his sincerity touched her. What happened after I left? Success by every metric I valued, he replied. Partnership, recognition, the perfect apartment. A rueful smile, and a growing emptiness I couldn't explain. And now I'm learning to measure differently. Nathan turned his coffee cup slowly. I've stepped back from the partnership, started consulting with organizations focused on authentic leadership, trying to practice what I've learned, partly through your work. Olivia absorbed this, feeling neither triumph nor resentment, but a gentle appreciation for the complexity of human growth. That takes courage. I had a good teacher, even if I was too stubborn to learn when we were together. He met her eyes directly. I'm not here to disrupt your life, Olivia. You've built something remarkable. I just wanted you to know that your words reached even the most unlikely audience. They mattered to me. The simplicity of his acknowledgement warmed her. Not romantic pursuit or elaborate apology, just honest recognition of impact. Thank you for telling me, she said. It matters to know that. They spoke for another hour, not about rekindling what was lost, but about the people they'd become. Nathan described his volunteer work teaching communication skills to at-risk youth. Olivia shared stories from her latest workshop series on helping people reclaim their silenced narratives. When they finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped. Streetlights reflected in puddles like scattered stars. Dr. Winters is organizing a symposium on transformative communication next spring, Olivia said impulsively. They're looking for speakers with diverse perspectives. If you're interested, I'd like that, Nathan replied, genuine warmth in his voice. They parted with a simple goodbye. No promises, no expectations. Just an acknowledgement that growth sometimes circled back in unexpected ways. Walking to her hotel, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the woman who had believed she wasn't enough, to the author and speaker who helped others find their voices. From the pain of rejection to the freedom of self-acceptance. She thought of Dr. Winters, who had first seen her potential. Of Madison Hayes, who had helped shape her message. Of the countless people who had shared their own stories of transformation. And now Nathan, representing a closed chapter that had reopened briefly, not to continue the old story, but to affirm how far they both had traveled. Her phone buzzed with a message from her agent. An invitation to develop a new workshop series on reconciliation and forgiveness in communication. Olivia smiled at the synchronicity. Tomorrow would bring new audiences, new challenges, new opportunities to connect through authenticity. The voice she'd found wasn't just for speaking from stages or writing bestsellers. It was for navigating the full complexity of being human, strong enough to stand in her truth, yet soft enough to recognize the humanity in others, even those who had once failed to see hers. The night sky cleared above her, revealing stars that had been there all along, waiting for the clouds to part. Olivia breathed deeply, feeling neither incomplete nor excessive, but precisely, perfectly enough.